name is Seren. I'm going to be reading you a short story from Ghost Stories 2, compiled by Dennis Pepper. The story I'm going to be reading to you today is called Room at the Inn, written by Sidney J. Bounds. This short story is from the same book as Spook House, written by Mark Alexander. If you want to hear me read that book too, go check out my first video. I will compile a playlist of all the short stories I have read from Ghost Stories 2 by Dennis Pepper, so that you can find them all together in one place. I hope you enjoyed listening to me read you this book. Room at the Inn by Sidney J. Bounds. Sunset had lain a sheen of blood over a bleak and desolate moorland. Wind came in great gusts, blowing the 2 cycles across the empty road, carrying with it an icy lash of rain. Jane Black and her younger sister Penny, on a cycling tour of Cornwall, were somewhere on Bodmin Moor. "This," Jane said a little grimly, "is no longer funny. We'll have to stop and keep up." The 2 girls, both in jeans and wind cheaters, got off their bikes, unrolled yellow oilskins, and put them on. When they started off again, the wind howled in fury and threatened to blow them right off the road. The sun had almost gone and dark clouds piled high in a granite sky. "It's a pity we ever left the main road," Penny gasped, head down and wrestling with her machine to keep it upright. "Any idea where we are?" Her words were whipped away. "What was that?" Jane shouted. I said, "Oh, never mind." The sky split and rain deluged down. "We'll never get a tent up in this," Jane said. "Have to press on till we find some kind of shelter." They were miles from any village, and there wasn't a house or even a car in sight. Jane had the eerie notion they were lone survivors, cut off from the rest of the world. Heads down, braced against the wind, they cycled through drenching rain. "A light," Penny pointed, and fell off her bike. Jane braked. "You all right?" "Of course I am. Look over there." To the left, standing back from the road and on the crest of a tor, was the shadow of a house with a yellow light burning. "Come on," Jane said briskly. "No one can refuse us shelter tonight." They pushed their bikes towards a building and entered a yard. Outhouses cut off some of the wind. They put their bikes out of the rain, unstrapped their saddlebags, and made a run for the door of the house. A dark sign swung creakily overhead. "It's an inn, and they won't hear us in this lot." Boldly, Jane pushed open the door and stepped into a stone-flagged passage. "Anyone home?" Just off the passage was a small bar with bottles and casks. An oil lamp burned here. The rest of the house was in darkness, silent. Her voice echoed in emptiness. A girl, not much older than Jane, appeared out of the gloom. Her skirt touched the floor. A shawl draped her shoulders, and her hair was done in ringlets. "My uncle's away just now. Can you put us in for the night?" Jane said quickly. "We're wet through." "And cold. And hungry," Penny added. The girl looked doubtful. "My uncle won't like—" She hesitated. "But I can't turn you away in this weather." "Yes, you can stay the night." "Thanks. We're cycling around Cornwall and—" "Cycling?" The girl looked blank, then said, "I'm called Jessica. Come through to the kitchen and get out of those wet things." Jane and Penny followed her along a dark passage to a kitchen with an oil lamp and stove. They stripped, and Jessica brought them each a blanket to wrap around them. They sat at a plain wood table on hard-backed chairs, and Jessica poured hot soup into bowls. "I'm afraid there isn't much else," she said. "We don't get many people stopping here." "Soup's lovely," Penny said. "I feel warm and sleepy already." Jessica lit a candle. "This way, then." They went up a flight of wooden stairs, the boards creaking, to another passage with doors leading off. Jessica opened one. "In here." Penny saw that the door next door, the last in the passage, was closed and padlocked. "What's in there?" she asked, curious. Jane said quickly, "None of your business," and pushed her into their bedroom. The walls were plaster, the boards bare. There was an old-fashioned double bed and grime on a window, which looked as if it had not been opened for years. Jessica handed Jane a large iron key, one end of which was cross-shaped. "Lock your door," she said solemnly. "Don't open it no matter what you hear tonight." "What are we likely to hear?" Penny asked promptly. Jessica shut the door on them. Jane put the key into the lock and turned it, felt the bed. Damp. Lucky we've got our sleeping bags. Pretty primitive, the whole place. Penny sniffed. And Jessica, I think she's weird. Snug in her sleeping bag, the last thing Jane heard was the drumming of the rain. She woke reluctantly, becoming slowly aware of a hand shaking her shoulder, and Penny's urgent voice. Something funny's going on. Not funny. Go back to sleep. Oh, wake up, Jane, please. Jane realised that the wind and rain had stopped, and drunken singing rose from below. Penny pushed a wristwatch before her eyes. It's 3 a.m, and just look out here. Penny crossed to the window and pointed down. Jane wriggled out of her sleeping bag and padded over bare boards. A full moon hung in the sky. Wheels rumbled noisily as a train of horse-drawn wagons pulled into the yard below. She heard coarse laughter follow some of the words. The men with the wagons were dressed in jerseys and dark, flaring trousers. Some had knives and one had an eye patch. Their leader, big and bearded, cursed them. A villainous lot, Penny said. What do you suppose they're doing? Large boxes were dragged from the wagons and let fall heavily on the ground. Staggering, the men carried them one by one through the inn porch. Presently there came a bumping sound as the boxes were hauled up the stairs. Boots echoed in the passage. Wood scraped as the boxes were dragged past the girl's bedroom. Iron rattled. The locked room next door, Penny whispered, excitedly. Do you think they're smugglers? Don't be silly, Jane said, and keep quiet. Remembering what Jessica had told them, she added, Anyway, it's nothing to do with us. Heavy footfalls came along the passage, stopped outside their door. A hand rattled the door handle, and a harsh voice demanded, Anyone in here? Jane clamped her hand over Penny's mouth, and Jessica's voice sounded in the passage. 2 guests caught by the weather. They're locked in and drugged. The man laughed unpleasantly. Lucky for them. Show their noses tonight and they'll get their throats cut. Penny shivered. I don't like this, she whispered. I'm scared. There were more scraping noises as boxes were shoved into the room next door. The men made several trips, then the door was locked again. Boots trod the bare boards going downstairs. The last pair paused outside the bedroom. Don't even breathe, Jane whispered, hugging her sister. Finally, the last man moved away, and the passage was silent again. There came a creak of harness and a clop-clop of hooves. Cautiously, Jane peered from the window. She saw the wagon train leaving the inn, heading out across the moonlit moor. It's all right, Penny. They've gone now. The inn seemed strangely quiet, as the 2 girls wriggled deep into sleeping bags, and despite a sense of unease, both were soon asleep. Jane woke with the sun in her eyes. Her hip and shoulder ached from lying on hard and uneven ground. Ground? Suddenly she remembered where she was, and sat up. There was no roof, no walls, only a few flagstones scattered around. She lay on the ground with the moor stretching away into the distance. Penny was still asleep, curled up in her sleeping bag, and their bikes lay propped against a stone some yards away. Jane, realising with a chill that she lay in the ruins of the inn, pinched herself. She was sure she was awake. She shook Penny, and her sister woke suddenly. They haven't come back. Penny looked at the ruins in disbelief. It couldn't have been a dream. It was too real. Our clothes. Luckily there's no one about to see us. Jane was sure their clothes lay where the kitchen stove would have been. Abruptly she said, Come on, let's get away from here. They dressed quickly and rolled their sleeping bags. As Jane took hers, something metallic found out. A rusty iron key with a cross at one end. That was the end of Room at the Inn by Sidney J. Bounds. I hope you enjoyed listening if you read this book today. If you'd like more information about the book I am reading today, Ghost Stories 2, then please check the description box. Thank you for listening to me today.